All right. Had a little issue with some camera, but we're ready to get started. Don't have anyone in yet. I'm sure everybody is just trying to get in. Not a big deal. Usually takes a couple minutes to get started. So just kind of wait until that happens. Already at 3. So make sure you send me a question through Twitter. That's the only way I'll be able to see them. And yeah, I'll be on, since I started 5 minutes late, I'll go till 9:05 or until all questions basically stop. So measure of satisfaction, the first one, that's going to be utility. So anytime we talk about utility, that's, it's just a definition there. So if we're talking about marginal utility, we're talking about how much satisfaction am I going to get from one more, because that's what marginal basically means. Same thing with like marginal cost. How much is it going to cost me for one more? I don't remember if it's in there, but if we have a question on the law of diminishing marginal utility, the law of diminishing marginal utility is basically this. Every time I consume one more unit of a good or service, the utility, the satisfaction that I get from doing that is going to actually go down. And, I kind of talked about that at the beginning of the school year when we did this lesson, where, think of your favorite song. The first time you heard it, you probably really loved it. And then after you hear it, over and over again for like a week straight, you may not even care if you listen to that song anymore. So that's pretty much, I went all over the place with that one, but we got your measure of satisfaction. It's going to be utility. Let's see if we got any more. Right now, that's just the only question I got so far. Well, pretty easy final exam. All we got to worry about is the measure of satisfaction, though. I know one of the problems when we do things on our phone, sometimes you have to log off of YouTube, hurry up, submit the question, and then hop back on. So hopefully we don't have too much of that issue. It's a lot easier, obviously, if you have a laptop and a phone too. So still waiting on that next question. We got 21 of you and no questions. I think we can go by pretty fast then. It'll be done in no time. How do you find marginal cost in decision-making grid? Marginal cost. It's just, what's it going to cost you to, I know what you're talking about too with that one. Like, what's the marginal cost? I think a test question was like, what's the marginal cost associated with going from one grade to the next? All I need you to do is basically count up how many that's going to be. I mean, that's pretty much it. Marginal cost. I don't think, is that in a decision-making grid? Oh, yeah, it is. Okay. Normally we usually talk about opportunity cost with a decision-making grid. I say that's probably not even in your final exam, but that's okay. Elasticity of supply. So that's another one. So elasticity of supply, the thing, you don't have to do the math for that. I've talked with some classes. That study guide that you got is kind of like a hybrid of something that was made 5 years ago and then added on. When we first started doing this course 5 years ago, I used to make the students do the math to figure out whether it was actually elastic or not. And you don't have to do that this time. So all you need to really know for elasticity of supply is there's two things you have to consider. If it's easy to make more of something, then it's an elastic supply, because the elasticity of supply, and let's get into what it actually is too, is how much will supply change due to a change in price. And you know that it's always easy to reduce supply. Well, for the most part, I'll get into an example in a moment. But it's not always easy to increase supply. So like, for instance, if the price of shoes are going up, we know that with the law of supply, that as price goes up, supply will go up. So, producers are going to make more of it because they can make more money off of it. So if I can easily get leather and shoestrings and all the other things that go along with making shoes, then which you can, so that's an elastic one. So the example that I use for non-elastic is something that's really hard to make or something that's very complicated to do. So I always try and use something simple to explain this, and this would be like oranges. Let's say the price of oranges is going way up. So you would think that that would prompt people to want to go out and, grow more oranges. But we know that the problem with that is that once I plant a tree, I think I looked it up, it was like somewhere around 10 years. It'd take 10 years for oranges to grow on a tree, like to get to the point where it can grow on a tree. So, it's not something that I can increase supply of really quickly. Obviously, it's really slowly. Another thing is with gasoline. Gasoline's hard to find, and it's a long, complicated process to get it out of the earth and then turn it into gasoline, well, the oil into gasoline. So that's going to be an inelastic supply too. All right. Can you explain how a PPC? Oh, well, hold on. I'll do GDP next because I just skipped that one accident. Can you explain how a PPC can shift? Absolutely. So a PPC can shift to the right and it can shift to the left, just like we can with supply and demand curves. So a PPC curve, the only way it would shift to the right is if it came into more of one of the four factors of production. Realistically, I'll just say one of the three because I don't know how you can come into more entrepreneurship. So if I were to come into more labor, then that means that I should be able to make more, but I'm sorry. Yeah, I would be able to make more. And if I came into more capital, I would be able to make more of a product. And if I came into more natural resources, which is also known as land, that would also allow me to make more. But then the opposite is true too. If any of my four factors of production were to decrease, then it would shift to the left. So you would see it basically become a smaller arc. And then you can also see that the PPC would become a larger arc if it were to expand and move out to the right. Remember that as far as the PPC goes, the curve itself, the actual graph, is considered efficiency, meaning that efficiency is the most I can make. Nothing is being wasted. I'm using everything to the maximum possibility. And then anything inside of that, if for some reason that's what I'm making with my resources, that means I'm underutilizing my resources. I'm wasting something. And then anything beyond it. So some people say, oh, it's above it, like to the top. Well, that's true. Or it can be off to the right. Anything above the curve is going to be production and possibility, because we've already established that the curve is the most that you can make. So to go beyond the curve is impossible, which is why it's referred to as production and possibility. All right, so let's get back. I'm going to go back one. Can I go over gross domestic product? I can, yeah. There's a lot of gross domestic product. I don't know exactly what you want me to go over, but GDP, I mean, we talking real GDP? We talking nominal GDP? What are we doing here? So I'll just do this. I'm going to just kind of give out what gross domestic product is. If you really needed to know what real is and nominal, just follow that up. I'm sure someone else will probably do it anyways. But so GDP is it's basically one of the main ways that economists will measure the success of an economy. And basically what that is it's the total value of all the goods and services that are produced within a country during a certain within a year. Now, it doesn't matter when it's sold. It only matters when it's made. And we only count final products. So that's where the thing kind of gets confusing. It even confused me when I first started learning about it. Like, a lumber company, their whole job is to make wood. But if the wood gets turned into the house, then you don't count the wood, you count the house. So it gets pretty confusing with that you don't have to really know that. As far as this test goes, just know that GDP, well, here's the thing, is many of you made the mistake of mixing up GDP, gross domestic product, with gross national product. Gross national product, we extend it beyond our borders to include American companies that are functioning in foreign countries. And well, if we're using the United States for this example, and if we had American citizens working in other countries, we would count that too. That's gross national product. But we just kind of focus on gross domestic product for the purpose of this course. All right, let me see another one here. Be able to identify the impact the government actually has on. Okay, so Christian, for that one, you can forget that one. That's one I must have missed when I was deleting things from your final exam review. That would have been something that we would have covered if we actually got through all the stuff we were supposed to. That was something that we were going to cover. Like I said, we were going to cover. So it's not, don't worry about it. We might cover it when we get to government, but I don't recall. Rationing is when the government tells you how much you can have of something. So rationing, you think back to World War II when the United States government needed a whole lot of supplies for the war effort. So you would have cases where the government would give you coupons basically that said, here's how much gas you're allowed to purchase. And that's all you could get. So like if they gave you a coupon for, 20 gallons of gas, that's all you could purchase. And you couldn't purchase anymore. And you kind of could, because in your textbook, it even talks about how because of rationing, you had people who would basically go onto the black market because, maybe I'm a type of person where I don't drive that much. So maybe I only need 5 gallons of gasoline for the week. And so I sell you the 15 other ones. So that's kind of how the black market was created as far as that scenario goes. Pre-shift and post-shift. So pre-shift and post-shift is pretty easy. I know you're probably talking about supply and demand. So pre-shift is just when you see so like and this is the problem with doing this particular one because I don't have anything to draw on. But if you remember when we had a supply and demand curve, and it was just one supply curve and one demand curve, and we had the intersecting points. And then when I added a new demand curve or a new supply curve, so the new supply curve or new demand curve in that situation would be the post shift. So, and I always marked it by the even in your college, if you take economics in college, which I know some of you are like, oh, I don't want to do that. It's not that bad. Your economics books in college will also number it like I do in your class, where the original supply curve will be S1, or maybe it's just S, and then the new one will be S2, and then the same thing with demand curve, will be either D or D1, but the new one will always be D2. And so whatever the second one is, so if I have a new demand curve, wherever it intersects with the original supply curve, that's going to be the post shift. So that's where we would look at for our new price. That's where we would look at for our new market equilibrium as well. So hopefully that was helpful. Gross national product. So that's something we talked about actually just a moment ago. Gross national product is almost like gross domestic product. Remember, gross domestic product only talks about things that are made within a country. We don't actually count things that are made outside of the country. So but that's where gross national product is. So like Ford Motor Company is an American company, but they don't just make things inside of the United States. They make a lot of cars in Mexico. They make some cars over in Asia. And because they're an American company, we would also include that in gross national products. So we would include all the value of the goods and services that are produced by those American companies. And we're also supposed to extend that to the people who are citizens of our country, but working abroad. That's going to be gross national product. And she says, never mind. So you know what? I did it anyway. So tough. What's marginal utility? So marginal is, I think I did that earlier. I'll do it again anyways. Normally I'm rude and say, no, we'll rewind the video, but oh well. Marginal utility. Marginal is always talking about one more, and utility is satisfaction. So how much more satisfaction am I going to get by consuming one more unit? Another thing I used to do, I know I used the song reference earlier. I'm like, oh yeah, you're really, really super hungry, and you eat a plate of nachos, and it was so satisfying. And then I give you a second plate, and you're like, oh, you know what? That was pretty good too. But it really wasn't as good as the first one because you weren't as hungry the second time. And then what if I give you a third one? And then you're like, ooh, that's kind of too much. Well, I'm going to give you a fourth one now. And then at some point, you don't have any utility. It's like negative. So what does it mean to economize? Oh, I always struggle with that one. It is to basically, oh man, I'm gonna have to think of that one. I always struggle with that one. I know it has to deal with making the best decision based off of, oh goodness gracious, what is it? That's the one question I can never remember. I could do it if it was a multiple choice question, but oh well. Let me try it again. So economize means to make a decision based off of like a cost benefit analysis and trade-offs. I'll go with that. You know what? Ask me that before your final exam tomorrow, and I'll tell you, because I'm gonna have to look it up. That's the one question you could ask me that I just always forget for some stupid reason. So you got me on one. Who decides what will be produced? Is this the government? Depends. Depends on what type of economic system you're looking at. If you're looking at a command economy, yes, the government is the one who goes ahead and decides what will be produced, because that's what socialism does, communism too. We talked about the benefits and the positives of a command economy, but if you look at a market, if you look at a market economy, there's two arguments, and I'm just going to tell you that I'm going to say you need to do it this way. Maybe if you have somebody in college, they might tell you something different, and I'm okay with that. So there's an argument that can be made that the consumer decides what should be made in a market economy. And to that, I say, yes, sort of. I mean, if I'm a smart producer, then I make the things that consumers want, because obviously if I don't, I'm going to go out of business. But I could be a not smart producer. I could be a dumb producer. I always like to joke around like, yeah, I'm going to make some pink booty shorts for guys that say juicy on the back. Probably not a big demand for those, and I would probably go out of business pretty quick. Although maybe some of our students might pick them up. I don't know. But still, so it's going to be all three if you see that tomorrow. So just the government, the producers, and the consumers. So keep an eye out for that. I answered this earlier with a student. Can you have an increase in GDP without an increase in productivity? The answer is yes, you can. But of course, we always have to know why. The answer would be you have to know what productivity means. And, the way the book explains it, I can see how students get confused, because they're like, you need to make more outputs with the same number of inputs. And, if you have no idea what that is, you're like, well, what? So, all right. So think of it this way. Oh, goodness gracious. I want to pick something up. All right. I got this cable controller. Okay, whatever. All right. So can I make, so for this is productivity, can I make more than this controller with the same amount of materials that I have? If I can, then that means I've become more productive. But if I hire someone, like if I just hire another person, I'm not making more controllers with the same materials and resources, because I'm just having one more person and they're using their own resources. So short answer is yes, you can have an increase. Yes, you can have an increase in GDP, because if another person is working, they're making whatever that product is. And remember, GDP is the value of all goods and services. So I would have to add that to GDP, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm more productive. Let me backtrack and make sure I can see this. Characteristics of a franchise and a corporation. Remember, a franchise is, a franchise and a corporation sometimes they can be getting confused, but for the purposes of ours, remember, a corporation has stockholders. That's the biggest thing to do. And with a franchise, remember, you're basically selling. Yeah. Like, so McDonald's is both a corporation and a franchise. So, but not all franchises are corporations. So whatever, I probably just confused you. So let's try and clean it up a little bit. Just corporations, you have stockholders and you have a board of executives. And you usually have some financial officers, or I'm sorry, just you have some corporate officers like CEOs and things like that make the decisions along with the board. Also, they can sell stock. So I think I already said that. They have double taxation. That's the only one of the corporate or business organizations that has double taxation. It's kind of it. They're always the larger ones. They also make the most money. They're also the most difficult to start up. A franchise, remember this, if I'm a franchise, then that means I am allowing someone to basically use my business model and product. And then they give me royalty fees as well as a cut of the profits. So let's try this. I think I looked up one time. Jets is you can become a franchisee of Jets, but Jets is not a corporation. So I don't think I can buy stock in Jets. So basically, I would go to the owner of Jets and go, you know what, hey, I really like your pizza. I think I could make some money doing this. You know, what do I have to do to become an owner of a Jets? And then we would work out an agreement, and it would come down to, like I said, I would pay them a fee to even use their products. You know, some advantages too is that anytime Jets were to run a commercial, that would be something that I wouldn't even had to pay extra for, because it would be included in whatever it is that I'm paying them. Then it's like free good advertising. Of course, we talked about some negatives too, like if I'm at McDonald's and if I see a story on McDonald's about, you know, finding, you know, mouse poop in one of the fries, I may not want to go to any McDonald's now. So even though it wasn't my McDonald's that had the you know, the stuff in the fries, people will sit there and think negatively about McDonald's and go, oh, you know, I don't really want to go there. So there's your differences. Keep in mind too, both of them don't have much control. As far as a franchise, you kind of have to do what the franchisor tells you to do. Like, I mean, we talked about you talked about in class because you did that for a project, but a lot of the only decisions you really get is, you know, who you can hire, because the menu's fixed. I can't be like, yeah, I'm gonna make a new sandwich at McDonald's. It doesn't happen that way. So that was a lot. What factor reflects all the resources used to make a product, including employees and raw materials? It's going to be capital. Okay, a lot of people think labor. Labor is talking about all the work that goes into it, and where people get confused, or excuse me, get the part wrong, is labor also extends to include the planning phase. So, like for instance, if you're talking about making a car, well, at some point, someone had to do the blueprints and all the test driving, and you know, all the other tests that go along with making a car before you put it on the assembly line. That's included in labor as well. Can you give a scenario on inflation? Well, there's a lot of scenarios for inflation. So I mean, there was one like, you know, it has a negative impact on savings. It has a negative impact on, because it decreases the value of the dollar. So I know for some of my honors students had to do something on inflation. So you know, the question I asked them is, how can inflation hurt people on a fixed income? And if you don't remember what a fixed income, you know, the word fixed means it's fixed. It stays in place. So the problem is that if I'm on a fixed income, so let's say my fixed income is $4,000 a month. So that means every month I'm going to make $4,000, and it's not going to change. Next year, I'm going to make $4,000 a month. And the year after that, I'm going to make $4,000 a month, and then so forth and so on and so on. So the issue with this becomes that with inflation, we know that the value of the dollar goes down because everything becomes more expensive. So if everything becomes more expensive and my wages don't change because I'm on fixed income, that means every year that I'm on fixed income, I can buy less than the year I did before. So the longer you're on fixed income, the more creative people have to get sometimes with their particular budgets because of inflation. There are other things too, like inflation hurts. Inflation hurts savings, because anytime you go to a bank and you put money in the bank, like a savings account, the savings account interest rates that the bank will give you, they're always trash. They're terrible. And what it is basically the interest rate that you get from the bank is always lower than I'm going to say always, but almost always lower than the rate of inflation. So basically, let's say, I'll just make it kind of easy. Like if I put $100 in the bank, and I'm totally ripping off your book, but I don't care. So if I were to put $100 in the bank and then it had 5% interest rate, which by the way, that is an outstanding interest rate. I don't even think I get 1% for my bank account. So at the end of a year, I'd have $105. So the problem is this: if inflation were 6%, that means that my $105 is actually worth less than my $100 at the beginning because of inflation. So the other one was interest rates too, for loaning. When inflation gets out of control and becomes a little high, banks are all about saving money, making money. They don't want to lose it. So when inflation gets high, they adjust their interest rates. So what they're going to charge you to loan or to borrow money from them. So basically, it becomes more expensive to borrow money. And those are your three scenarios that I can think of, at least. Let me see here. That's that. That's one. What are the factors that make up the formula for gross domestic product? That's C plus I plus G plus X. That's consumption plus investment plus government spending and net exports. So let me see if I can think of it. Consumption is what basically households and businesses spend on durable and non-durable goods. Investment, I think that's what companies invest as far as capital. Government spending is obviously government spending, and net exports is talking about basically what's the difference between how much I imported versus exported. So there you go with that. What is the law of diminishing marginal utility? I did diminishing marginal utility already. How do you calculate demand and supply? I have no idea what that question is. So I don't know. Sorry. You're going to have to clean that question up a little bit. What? All right. Yeah, I'm not doing that one. Anyways, I just got something from Take My Online Exam. This is why I used to have everybody sign up for this and where I could reject it. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Let's try this other one. Which way does a demand curve shift? Which way does the supply curve shift? Shift? They both shift either way. I wonder if you're thinking about which direction they go. If you're looking at what direction they go, the supply curve always goes from, what is it? Let me see. From lower left to upper right. And that follows the law of supply, because in the lower left, that's where the prices are the lowest. And for supply, we know that as price goes up, so does supply. And the demand will go from the upper left to the lower right, which also follows the law of demand, because the cheaper something is, the more that people will want to buy of it. So keep in mind, I mean, I don't know what's really going on with that question. But yeah, so I think you just probably followed it up. I keep getting confused on the difference between market, individual supply, and demand curve. That's fine. So market, let's do this first. Individual. How many people are individual? That's one. So if we're talking demand, so like if we had, hamburgers at McDonald's and we had, here's the price of them. And then, at $1, here's how many I would buy. And at $2, how many I'd buy, and $3 and so forth. So that's individual. That's pretty easy. I mean, it's always individual. It's one person. And so if it were market, you would talk about like basically everybody. How many hamburgers will everybody buy at $1? How many hamburgers will everybody buy at $2 and $3 and $4? And then when we get into supply, it's pretty much the same concept. Let's talk about, I always use basketballs, but so how many basketballs will Spalding produce at $5? And then $10 and $15 and $20 and so on and so on. Well, that's a individual supply curve and an individual schedule. And keep in mind, I mean, an individual supply schedule will say the same information. The difference is one looks like a graph and the other one looks like a table with numbers. So a market supply curve and a market supply schedule would include all basketball producers. How many basketballs will all the basketball producers make at $5 and $10 and $15 and $20? So there's your differences between individual supply, individual and market. So hopefully that helps you out there. Will we have to calculate total revenue on the final? Yes. Total revenue is price times quantity. Characteristics of underemployment. There's two ways to have underemployment. Underemployment goes with, underemployment goes with if I'm a part-time worker. if I'm a part-time worker, and let me just, because a lot of students in the written portion, I don't know if that was on the honors, or I don't think that was on the non-honors test recently, but the place where students kept getting mistaken is that if I'm a part-time worker, that doesn't mean that I'm underemployed. I'm only underemployed if I'm a part-time worker and I want full-time work. So I know it's kind of petty that I was marking people off on that, but I don't care. There's a big difference between the two. So, and then the other one would be underemployed would be like, I have a job, but my skill set is way above what my job is. So, think of like, hey, I graduated law school and I'm working at Burger King. I had a conversation with a student last year. She graduated Chandler Park 2 years ago, and so she was in her first year at Michigan State, but she was valedictorian, and she had graduated with her dual enrollment degree too, so she had an associate's, but she was doing something that wasn't paying very much. I think it was somewhere around minimum wage, and it was just hilarious because she, even in the email back and forth, she's like, I think I'm what's called underemployed. So it was nice to see that she could rely on something that we had taught in class. What is it's on the review? Well, I don't have the review in front of me. Not to calculate. So demand and supply. I don't know what to tell you. Send me a picture of it. Maybe I can look at it. What is market equilibrium? Market equilibrium is going to be when the quantity supplied equals the quantity demanded. So if you're looking at a supply curve and a demand curve together, it's where they intersect. So, you have the X, and then you just basically go straight down, and whatever that quantity is at the bottom, that's the market equilibrium. And then when I ask you a question, when I ask you a question about what is the market equilibrium price, well, take where that X intersects at, and then go to the left, because that's where price is, and that would be your market equilibrium price. So, is it like a way to help us remember the 6 factors that affect supply and 6 factors that affect demand? I don't have like a given formula. I just know what they are. I mean, sorry, I don't have like a magic trick for that one. Oh, never mind. It said elasticity in front. My bad. Yeah, so that goes back to what I talked about earlier, where you don't have to do that this year. Only the poor, unfortunate souls of 5 years ago had to do that. And the only reason I do that is because there's no way on M-Step you're going to have to do that. So why am I going to waste your time and my time trying to do it? Number 64 says, identify the impact that government action has. Okay, yeah, that you joined a little late. That is actually not going to be on your test. That was something that I had meant to teach you, but as I told you last week, we just ran out of time. And so when I was going through and deleting a bunch of things off of the original document, I must have just missed that one. So, I mean, if you really want to know, I can have a conversation with you, after class or after your final's over with, and we can reminisce on that particular question, but I don't think you'll take me up on that opportunity. So, all right, what do I got now? Oh, I got it over here. Let me see. I got what, Mark? I already did that one. Can you explain how scarcity affects consumers and producers? What is this? It's somebody that says, I'm James the Google Snarf, and I want my oil back now. Okay. Good going there. Whatever. All right, so I'll do this one. Can you explain how scarcity affects consumers and producers? Absolutely. That's a question that it seems like no matter how many times I talk about it, I didn't explain it. We get masses amount of students who just fire up the wrong answer. So the way that I try and explain it is this. So when we're talking about the consumer, we're talking about you, we're talking about me. I certainly don't have unlimited resources. And when I'm talking unlimited resource or just resources for me, I'm talking about money. Working at Chandler Park, I certainly don't have unlimited money. Ha ha ha. I always make a joke about my income, but it's not that bad. But either way, I don't have unlimited money, so I have to make decisions. I'm like, all right, I got scarce resources, but I got unlimited wants. I got unlimited needs. I mean, like I could just spend money like it's, if you had like unlimited money, could you run out of buying things? I mean, you just be buying things to buy things. You'd be just throwing money at people on the street. But anyways, so I have to actually make a decision. What am I going to buy? If I got $10 on me and I'm like, oh, well, I want pizza and I want tacos, but I can't afford pizza and tacos. I can only afford one. So again, it's a decision I have to make, is that I have to figure out how to satisfy my unlimited wants and my unlimited needs. And, some people are very good at that. They don't have any problems. They're able to satisfy them. I mean, their unlimited wants and needs are never truly satisfied, but they do a good job of that. And then you have some people who are like, yep, I got paid on Friday, I'm broke on Saturday, because they went and partied on the weekend. And I always play that song Gator Boots to try and show how someone does a poor job of managing their money for wants and needs. Now, producers is usually the one where students have the most trouble. So let me see here. Oh, I do have one. I used this example. Was it today or yesterday? I have a Bic pencil in my hand. So Bic is going to be the producer. Now, Bic, I say Bic, B-I-C. I know some of you are sitting there thinking I said something else. They make a lot of things, but they don't make everything. There's not one company out there, period, who makes everything. I had somebody say Walmart. Well, Walmart's not a producer. They sell things. So, and even Walmart doesn't have everything. I can't go buy a house from Walmart. So anyways, I can't go buy a donkey or a lion. Why did I say donkey? Whatever. I can't go buy a lion from Walmart. But anyways, so Bic makes things like pencils and pens and lighters and razors. Ooh, the razors are terrible too. And I think they make lighter fluid, and they might make some other things, but they don't make everything. And they have limited resources too, just like you and I do. So they have to make a decision. They have to make a decision of, what am I going to make with my limited resources, my scarce resources, that's going to make me the most profit? Because that's what it always comes down to for a business, is what can I make that's going to make me profit? Because if it's not profitable, then I'm not going to make it. And unfortunately, one of the things we didn't get to talk about, because we just didn't get there, is that if something becomes not as profitable as it used to be, for whatever reason, I will not make it anymore and go switch to something else. I guess I sort of did talk about that before, like, why do they not make PlayStation 2s anymore? Because it's not as profitable and it's not worth the time for Sony to make them. So they make something else. But at the same time, Sony doesn't make, surfboards and skateboards and, whatever else. So, all right, let's get back to some questions here. Can you explain what effect will price ceilings and floors have on the market? And then for the next question, no, there's no written response at all on the test, whether you're honors or whether you're non-honors. I was able to just say, hey, I make my kids write all the time on tests. I think they need a break. And so, luckily they were like, we agree. Or they just said, okay, and didn't really want to fight. Whatever, you don't have a written portion. So get back to price ceilings and price floors. So price ceiling, like, I don't know why this is such a hard concept. And when I teach it in class, I go, hey, people make this mistake all the time, so really pay attention. And then, that's when students are like, but anyways, a ceiling is going, like, I can't go through the ceiling. That's the highest I can go. And that's exactly how a price ceiling works. I can't price something higher than the price ceiling. Now, in order for a price ceiling to actually work, I have to put it below the market equilibrium price. And this is one of those questions where I wish I had it on a board. So when I taught, I had some students ask me about this earlier today and yesterday. So it's always easier with the whiteboard, but whatever, this is where we're at. So a price ceiling, if you put it above market equilibrium, that doesn't really make any sense, because that's the highest it can go. But if the market equilibrium is already below the price ceiling, then that's pointless. It doesn't do anything, because the market equilibrium will not change. So, like, for instance, if let's just say that the market equilibrium price was $10, and then the government, and by the way, the government doesn't do a lot of this. It's not like there's a price ceiling and a floor and everything. That's where students always run wild with. It's like, oh, why do they have a ceiling on it? They don't. So if the market equilibrium was 10 and I put a price ceiling at 5, then that means the price of whatever that good was has to move from $10 to $5. Now, there's some positives and some negatives that are associated with that. The positive is, obviously, when it goes from $10 to $5, it becomes cheaper. But the problem is that we know, or at least I hope you know, and maybe you'll learn again, is that anytime the price is put below market equilibrium, that means a shortage is going to occur. So the nice thing is like, yay, it's cheaper, but then you're like, oh, I can't find it because there's a shortage. So some things that are associated with that, was it rent control is usually one of those things. Yeah, some other, and I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. I'd have to look back up. But a price floor, so that's going to do the opposite, and the price floor is going to be, that's the lowest that I can actually charge for something. And what that does is it makes things more expensive. So in order to make a effective price floor, you have to put it above market equilibrium. And so an example of a price floor is something that you're probably pretty thankful for with your age. It's called minimum wage. Minimum wage is a price floor. So, like, for instance, I never remember what the minimum wage is because thankfully I don't make it at this point in my life. I used to. My minimum wage when I was your age was like $4. And you're probably like, oh, that sucks. And I'm like, yep, but gas was only $1 a gallon. So whatever. So like, for instance, market equilibrium, there could be $6. Like, that could be where it's at. But then because the government's like, nah, you can't do that. We got a minimum wage. So then employers have to go ahead and pay that. They can't pay you below minimum wage. So then there's some positives, some negatives that go along with that too. You have the case where obviously things become more expensive. Obviously, if you're a worker, you're like, I don't care, I'm getting more money. But there are some other things associated with that. Like for me, when minimum wage goes up, it kind of sucks for me because the things that I purchase from places that pay their employees minimum wage, it becomes more expensive. But if we're talking about like producing goods, like for food, the government does this for food a lot because they want to encourage farmers to keep making food, because you certainly don't want a shortage of food because, that ends up with a whole bunch of different problems. So what they'll do is, the nice thing is that, hey, there's always enough food, but the problem is that food is more expensive. So those are two ways in which price floors, excuse me, would be applied. Remember, the price floor always has to be placed above market equilibrium in order to be effective. I don't have any more questions, and I've got 17 minutes to go. Of course, by what I saw going on in class the last 3 days, I got people that must have been ready for that final exam at Monday. Difference between surplus and shortage. Okay, so a surplus, let's just go with definitions. A surplus is when I have a higher quantity of supply than a higher quantity of demand. So like, for instance, at $5, if the quantity supplied was 30 and the quantity demanded was 20, I'd have a surplus of 10. And then a shortage is going to be that I have more demand than supply. So let's just turn that around. So if at $5, the quantity demanded was 30 and the quantity supplied was 20, I'd have a shortage of 20. And those are really easy to determine when we look at a supply and demand schedule. And I don't think it's very difficult personally to try and figure out a surplus and a shortage when looking at a supply and demand curve. I did teach that in class. It's not really something I can do over a video chat. So the way that I would just try and do this is, so if I ask you, will I have a shortage or a surplus at this price? Well, remember, if the price is above where the market equilibrium occurs, then I'm going to have a surplus. So you would take the price, so wherever it is on the graph, and then run your finger across it. When you hit the supply curve or demand curve, which one comes first? When you hit the demand curve, you look down and see the quantity, and then you go back up to that spot and you keep going over to the side, and then you see where you hit the next curve at. and what's the quantity. So what's the difference between the two? So that's how you do it. And you do the same thing for shortage. Remember, shortage is going to be below the market equilibrium point on a graph. So why does price floors have to be above market equilibrium? Because remember, the price floor is the lowest that I can charge. If I put it below market equilibrium, it didn't do anything, because the whole purpose of a price floor is to bring the price up. So if I put it below market equilibrium, then it does nothing. I mean, if the price floor is 8 and we've already agreed to sell it at 10, like that's where the market equilibrium hits, then the $8 floor is pointless. So hopefully that answers your question. I got no questions. It's 8:51. I got 14 minutes left, and I'm going to bed. While y'all study, I'm gonna be sleeping. And when I get up at 3 in the morning to go to the gym, y'all still gonna be studying. A whopping 17 viewers right now. I just got done talking to somebody earlier. I'm like, I don't think I'll get to 15. Normally, I don't even get to 10. That's all right. The nice thing about this is you get to watch the archived video if you need to go back. Well, I'll tell you what, it's 8:52. At 8:54, if I don't have a new question by then, I'm going to sign off early. It's always exciting watching me look at my phone, I'm sure. It's what happens when I don't have the following like Tom Ritchie of thousands of people just sending me questions, but oh well. That was like a joke for one person. I have a question, and then you just put my name. Well, what is it? All right, competitive pricing. That's, man, I haven't talked about that in a while. That's my lamp. Oh well. All right, competitive pricing. There are 2 goals with competitive pricing. The first thing is I need to offer a product at a price low enough to take away business from my competitors, and I need to offer it at a price that still makes me profit, that's worth it. Like, I could go out there and start selling PlayStation 4s for $1, and of course, obviously, that's going to take away business from Microsoft, but that's not making me any profit, so that's just stupid. So that's basically how competitive pricing works. The more competitors you have in a market, the better. One, it will be through pricing. Usually they will try and fight each other over price. I gotta turn that lamp off. It's short now, but I'll wait. But the other thing is this, is let's say that, like, and this happens with Sony and Microsoft, like I just talked about, you know, they don't really have different prices because they know that they have to keep it at the same price, because if they don't, then they won't sell as much as they used to, because their competitor will end up making all the sales. So what you end up doing that's beneficial, or so what ends up happening that's beneficial for you, is that the two will try and keep improving their product to get your business. So yeah, I'm not going to change my product, but hey, look at all these new features I just came out with. So, you know, you really want to buy this from me. You know, there's some suckers over there. So, you know, come buy this from me. And we've seen all sorts of competitive pricing too. Like when I taught this lesson, it's even in the videos. You know, that's the one thing you have this year that other classes don't have. I didn't make those economic videos until this year. You know, like somebody came out with 4 for 4 or 5 for 5, and then everybody got 5 for 5, and the companies that don't get much business, and they're like, you know, throwing, you know, here's a cookie and a drink and 2 sandwiches and a large fry and a diamond ring and a card and keys to a Ferrari, all for $5. You know, so they're just obviously trying to steal away business from, you know, Burger King and McDonald's and Wendy's and things like that. So that's how you benefit from competitive pricing. You're going to get one of 2 things, either a lower price, or you might get both too. You should be getting a lower price. And if you don't, then businesses will compete for you, for your your money by trying to improve their product. Don't sign off. Let me think. Well, you got 10 minutes. What is the difference between increasing returns and diminishing returns? Okay. All right. So you can reach Tom Ritchie's view count one day. Oh, yeah. Well, I doubt that. So what's the difference between increasing returns and diminishing returns? As I drop a pencil. All right, so that's when we're talking about when we hire someone. If the marginal, oh my gosh, what's the name of it? The marginal product, I think that's a term for it, marginal product. If the marginal product goes up, so like the amount of how much I can make, so like I make 5 by myself, and then like I hire Chris Nay, and like that's more than one person. So we're more than one person now. So now it goes up to like we're making like 10. So that was an increase. Let me do this, like 7. So it goes up to 12. And so so that's gonna be whatever. So then I hire, some random guy off the street, and now it goes from 12 to 22. So every time I hire someone, I'm making more than I did before. Not like as in like, total, but like by hiring that person, I can make more than I could with just hiring the last person. It's always hard to do this without a graph, without a whiteboard, because I need numbers in front of me and in front of you to show you. But anyways, as long as you keep seeing that number increase, you have, well, obviously it's called increasing returns. And then once it starts to go down, I'm not saying you're making like negative, but you like if I hired, let's do this way, try and think of it. If I hired Chris Nay and we went up 7, so went up to 12, and then I hire the next guy and it went up to 18. Well, it still went up, but it went up less. So instead of going up 7, it went up 6, and that's why I start seeing diminishing returns. So Tom Ritchie's view count one day, probably not. I'll probably be out of teaching by the time that occurs. I got to get 1,000 followers and 4,000 hours worth of watch time just to make a penny off of these videos. I ain't even close. I got 102 people subscribing, but that's okay. What's an external issue compared to a business decision? Oh, okay, I got you. All right, so external issues are things beyond a government's control. So like I always talk about natural disasters. Like, so if you're like hey, an earthquake hit Chandler Park, well, that would suck because I'd be out of a job, but I know y'all would celebrate and dance in the light of the flames as it burned to the ground. But anyways, so that's something that you can't control. So that's, let me see, that's like one thing. Let me do this. Let's do the hurricane. So hurricanes over in what was the country? In Puerto Rico. So Puerto Rico is still being ravaged, just devastated by the hurricane that happened several months ago. And so obviously their GDP has gone down because of that. So business decisions, that's just an active decision by a business to cut back on production. So laying people off. So like, hey, demand isn't what it used to be. So we're going to just lay some people off. I know where people have gotten confused on before. They always think that when I put the scenario out there, like the business chooses not to borrow money because of the high interest rates. Well, they're like, oh, well, they said they made a decision, so it's got to be business decision. Like, now, no, the reason why they're not doing it is because they're not borrowing money, and that would be inflation rate. So business will act that way too. If it becomes too expensive for them to borrow money, they just flat out won't. And so then what happens is they don't go out and invest, and then they don't need to spend money, and then that counts as part of a reason for a contraction phase. All right. Durable and non-durable good. Non-durable good are things that wear out really fast. I always keep it really simple. I'm like a piece of gum. Like I wouldn't go out and use a piece of gum twice. I know that's kind of like a silly example, but I just try and keep it as simple as possible. And a durable good would be things that you can use over and over again, like a car. I certainly would not want a non-durable car. That would suck. Like, I drive it to work and then I got to get a new car, and then I drive it home and then I got to get a new car, and you know what I'm saying. All right, let's see this next one. I did diminishing, and okay, so I did that one. All right. Well, we're looking at 4 minutes. 4 minutes. We got anything else in 4 minutes? I mean, honestly, if you've been prepping all week, you'll be fine. And if you've been a successful student all year, you should be successful tomorrow. Especially my honors crew. I know you get the AP economics exam. It's not truly an AP economics exam, just all of the multiple choice questions I could find that are from advanced placement that relate to ours. As it's not a big deal. Everything you're being asked, we covered in class. And if for some reason you feel, hey, I don't think we covered this, bring it to my attention. Maybe I missed one when I was going through it and eliminating them. And if that's the case, I'll just tell you what the answer is. It's not a big deal. My fault. The other issue tomorrow, I know you're going to be upset. At least my students will be. If you're in here for Mr. Wiles' class, you don't care because I didn't have me. I cannot get the 100 question answer sheets for zip grade to print out. Well, I can print them out, but then the circles don't show up. So it's just numbers and no circles. So we're going to have to do Scantrons tomorrow, which means I can't tell you how you scored when you turn it in. So you're just going to have to wait until later in the day, I guess. It sucks. And nothing I can do about it. And it's only the 100 question ones that are having a problem because I don't have any issues with the 20 and 50. So I know you're all heartbroken. Yeah, right. All right. Well, it looks like we're probably going to finish it up unless somebody sneaks a question in the next 3 minutes. So for those of you who are complaining like, oh, you don't let us use a cheat sheet. Well, hey, at least it did this. And how many other staff members have videos up that you could watch through the entire school year? The entire school year. We're talking on the test you didn't do well on before. I know what goes on. I see those counts. There's like 10 the day before the test. Like I make a video, it takes me 2 hours. It's like 10 views, and then on test day it explodes to like 100. Yeah, because that's probably not the best day to watch the day of. But anyways, I'm a little salty, but not too much. No, and the BACtrack too. I said, if you were successful all year long, you'll probably be successful. I don't want to say that if you haven't been successful, that you won't be successful. Things change. I saw some students make some great progress in the last month through the tiered learning centers. I know some of you, it drives you crazy doing them, but your test grades are going up. So, I mean, I don't like doing them, but really boring for me. But in the end, it's about increased scores and whatever. Maybe I won't have to do them next year. But for now, I do. Although honors, I talked to you about that today. I'm not doing that anymore for you. And some of you were upset. Sorry. You can always ask to be transferred out. Of course, you have to remember, I don't control that. All right, well, it looks like that is going to be it because it is 9:04 in some seconds. So I will actually wait until it hits 9:05, and at 9:05, that'll be it. Unless I get something. It doesn't look like it, though. Nope, I got one now, of course. How determine whether it is business decision or interest rate increasing? Okay, so interest rate increasing, if it explicitly talks about the cost of borrowing money, that's because of the interest rate. If it's a business decision, it's going to be based off of basically what's going on as far as demand for their product. So, like a business decision, if sales are down at Ford, I'm not going to sit there and keep having the same people work. I'm going to lay some of them off. So that's it for that one. I don't know who that was, but that's all right. All right, kiddies, it is 9:05 and I have fulfilled my responsibility. I said I'd be on for an hour. I started 5 minutes late because I know how to fix that. It was stupidity, basically. So I was on for an hour. So thanks for the 20. I think we got up to 21 today, 21 views. It's not an all-time high. I am laughing at the AP Euro video review from last year for the final exam because I didn't make one new for this year, and they're all freaking out and watching it. So, all right, well, we'll see you tomorrow. Best of luck. If you have me and we don't have a final exam, just bring something to study. And I guess technically you could ask extra questions. Not a big deal. Later on.